So the Hizen was recently made available through the dockyard with the latest few patches that Wargaming has put out, and by now the mission chain for the Hizen has ended, and we can all freely get our hands on it. And the Hizen can do things like that, which is kind of cool. I think everybody likes being able to dev strike a Yoshino. But ultimately, the Hizen for me is a very, very mediocre ship overall. Because you can get shots like that on the Yoshino, but then you get shots like this. And yeah, that is a broadside Nagato, 7 kilometers away, and I only hit 3 out of 12 shells on it. So, I think we need to go ahead and talk about the Hizen, because this is a dockyard ship, and Wargaming is trying to make money off of it. You can complete 22 stages out of 26 required for the Hizen, but ultimately you have to pay for the last 4 stages, and those cost about 1,700 doubloons a pop, so it's not exactly cheap. Now, you'd think, hey, you get to get follow-up shots in the Nagato, surely these will connect for really good damage. Well, yes, but no. And so the Hizen is a ship that really kind of feels like just a letdown to me. Like, it's not a bad ship. I definitely have had decent games in it, but it's overall just a very mediocre car is the way I would describe it. So it's like, I don't really recommend people going out to spend their money on it, just because, honestly, you're really not getting something that's very fun to play, or that you're probably ever really going to consider getting again. Like, if you're somebody who has a Georgia or a Jean Bart, or even a Bage. The Bage is amazing. Why would you want to get this? Now, this ship is kind of closely related to the Izumo and the Yamagi. I'm going to go ahead and compare it to the Izumo because it is the other Tier 9 Japanese battleship. However, this ship is more like a Tier 9 Yamagi than anything else, which the Yamagi is not bad, but it takes the strengths of the Yamagi and kind of throws them away. And that's really what makes the Hizen so disappointing for me. Now, the Hizen has 12 16-inch guns, 410 millimeters in caliber, and much like the Minnesota to the Iowa, where it gets 3 more guns over its other 16-inch gun ship, like the Hizen is to the Izumo, it trades quite a lot for getting those 3 extra guns, and honestly, the trade-off really isn't worth it overall for the boat itself. For starters, the reload on the Hizen is much, much longer than the Izumo. The Izumo gets a 30-second reload. We call this standard battleship reload because a lot of BBs in the game tend to follow suit. Hizen, on the other hand, gets a 38-second reload. Alright, that's a pretty big trade-off already. What else? Well, Hizen has a 1.7 sigma on its accuracy. Okay, and the Izumo has a 2.0. So, I'm trading a massive amount of reload and a significant degree of accuracy for 3 extra guns. But at least those guns hit just as hard. Well, no, they don't. And see, that's another issue. The Hizen guns hit for 12,750 damage, which is less than the Izumo. And they have less armor-piercing penetration. Now, it's not bad armor-piercing penetration by any means. If you want a bad ship when it comes to armor-piercing, play the Minnesota. But it's not as good as the Izumo. And for the life of me rewatching that shot, I still can't figure out how I whiffed it. It only got 3 hits on a broadside hipper, but that's the Hizen for you. It is a very, very mediocre boat. And so you may ask, well, we've traded all of these parameters already on the guns. Surely there's got to be some other, good things about the boat. Well, no, actually, we're not done with trade-offs. More trade-offs include that the ship is slower than the Izumo. It's only 1.2 knots, but that's still worth mentioning, because the Izumo is not exactly a king of speed at Tier 9 to begin with. If you want speed, play an Iowa, Georgia, French battleship. But the fact that this boat is even slower is just a real big kick in the teeth. On top of that, the ship is far, far less durable. Notice that I have 4 heals down at the bottom of the screen. That's because I'm running Yamamoto. And I got a first blood on that Yoshino that you saw at the very beginning of this video. Which means This ship only has 3 heals by default, and they're just standard heals. That's like the Slava, that's like the Florida. For some reason, Wargaming decided to give it 1 less heal. And, well, the Izumo has very, very good HE resistance and overmatch protection because it has a 57mm deck. This allows it to comfortably bounce and shatter a lot of shells that are going to hit it. Hizen, 32mm, all around. And that really, really sucks for this ship. Because not only are you missing a very important section of armor compared to your friendly nation counterpart, but you're also losing a heal as well, so your tankiness is vastly weaker than the Izumos. And then on top of that, the Citadel protection on the Hizen is pretty bad. And the ship has a raised citadel, and it's not exactly protected by any turtleback or anything. The only thing that really keeps it from getting citadel quite often is that the citadel protection appears to be very thick. However, up close, you absolutely get decimated, and if you get a little bit too broadside, you will be citadeled quite easily in this boat. So, it's just like, you take all of the good things about the Imagi, whereas the Imagi had great armor for its tier, and has nice punchy guns for its tier. And then you take all the things that you like about the Izumo, and you just kind of strip them away, and combine the rest into this weird boat called Hizen. Now, I know I'm being very negative in this video, but I think the boat deserves it, because it's just not something that really is good, in my opinion. But it's not the worst ship at its tier. There are far, far weaker ships. I think the Minnesota is still the worst battleship at tier 9, and the German battleships are probably still weaker than this ship overall. But that's about it. I think every other battleship at tier 9 is probably better than this. I would put Iowa, Alsace, all the premiums, except for Pommern, well above this thing. So, kind of disappointing, but that is what we got. Now, the recommended playstyle, this is a Japanese battleship, you're going to want to be trying to snipe. And so you're going to want to go ahead and try to run Deadeye on this ship. And you kind of saw with the Nagato what happens when you get close to people. Not only are you losing your Deadeye, but because of the way Japanese battleship dispersion works, they don't really get more accurate the closer they get. They kind of just stay the same throughout, which means they're much better at hitting long-range shots than close-range shots. Much like the Slava is in that regard. But here, look at the shot on the Wukong here. This is a Charles Martel. That was 3 out of 12 shells. He's 10 kilometers away. Okay, you hit 3 out of 12. Now, because I do run reload in slot 6, my 38-second reload is actually 33 seconds. But that still means that I have to wait 33 seconds for my ship to give it another chance. Whereas other battleships almost always are going to connect something there. And Iowa is almost always going to connect something there. And Izumo is almost always going to connect something there. And that's basically the issue that I run into with this boat all the time. Is that it just never feels rewarding to play. Because this is the same game that I dev-struck that Yoshino in. But it still feels like a struggle to play this ship, even after dev-striking somebody, because the boat just doesn't work half the time. Now, there is one particularly nice strength about this ship, and you'll probably remember it or notice it's most similar to the Sovietsky Soyuz, and that is the armor belt. The armor belt on this ship is 350 millimeters, and it is quite tall. This is a lot like the Sovietsky Soyuz, where basically most of, I think 75% of the side profile on the ship is the main armor belt. And the reason that this is nice is that it does protect you from cruiser armor piercing quite well. And that does help out quite a bit. What isn't nice is that this is a Japanese ship, and your AA it's essentially 3 guys just hurling insults in Japanese at airplanes, and as you can tell, it's not very effective, but I mean, you do have enough health to, I guess, eat 10 of those. I hate CVs, by the way. I don't know if I've made that clear 1,000,001 times or not, but I hate them so much. But back to that armor belt, it does help out quite a bit with cruiser armor piercing, whereas, and you can see a shot like that right there. That was from a Georgia that only did 4k on my side. So if you get lucky, you can absorb a lot of hits with the side profile of the ship, whereas other ships, like say in Iowa, only have 38 millimeters to protect themselves, or like a Yamato or a Musashi that only have 32 millimeters there to protect themselves, which means that you just basically take a lot of damage. Now, as far as should you get this ship, I said earlier that I don't think you should. There's just a lot of issues with this boat that I just don't think warrant really anyone seeking it out to get it. The grind, as far as doing the dockyard events, takes quite a decent amount of work. Now, if you're someone like me who puts in a large amount of hours streaming the game, there essentially is no grind. You'll be done in no time, but most people probably have a limited time schedule, and you might only be able to play like a few hours a week at best, and that's probably going to be unobtainable for you. As far as buying the dockyard phases individually, it gets very expensive very quickly. If it's 1,750 doubloons, I think it is. It might be different, but I don't actually have a way to check right now. That is 3,500 doubloons for 2 tiers, and you need 26 of them. So doing the math on that one, that's a lot of doubloons just to get it that way. I would maybe say pick this up for free XP or coal if Wargaming ever releases it in that form eventually. However, don't hold your breath on that. Wargaming has never released any of those dockyard ships like that. The 4 that they've released so far have never come back to sale after their dockyard has expired. That would be Anchorage, Odin, the infamous Puerto Rico, and now Hizen. So, all in all, I think this is a ship that you guys could easily skip and not really be missing out on much. If you're really interested in a Japanese premium tier 9 battleship, I would recommend getting the Bajie. Now, I know technically that is Pan-Asian. It is almost a carbon copy of the Izumo, but it's just a little bit better because it has better accuracy for a reload trade-off, which, in my opinion, is well worth the trade-off itself. So that's the type of ship that you'd want to go for if you're really looking for that premium Japanese battleship experience. Now, luckily for me in this game, people have been kind of keeping their distance away from me. And that's what I said you kind of need to do with ships like this, not only because of how soft the ship is and how lacking it is in durability, but also just because it does make your guns perform a little bit better if you're able to take advantage of Deadeye. And if you're lucky enough, people may disrespect you. And when people disrespect you, you're actually able to do quite a bit of work with the guns itself. For example, that Riga, who just decided that he would give me free broadside, mainly because there's a Georgia in his face, and I just get to punch him for free. So, you can do things with the Hizen. It's not the worst ship in the game, but it's not a particularly interesting ship, and it's not one that I think I'll ever really be revisiting. Maybe the... I'm watching this video well after I played it. Yep. That Shima had spent the entire game unspotted, and he flanked all the way around just to kill our carrier. I had forgotten that had happened, but I just saw that it happened on my video player. It's just so stupid that that sort of thing happens. But yeah, going back to it, it's not a ship that I think I'll ever really be playing going forward unless people specifically request it. I think there are vastly more fun ships to play in terms of battleship at tier 9. You can play the Jean Bart, the Georgia, if you want, the Musashi, even though I find that ship very boring. I love the Iowa, Georgia. I said Georgia twice, but that's fine. It deserves it. So there's a ton of options that you have. Now, as far as the game that you're watching, all my team is dead. I'm in a 1v4 situation against 2 torpedo destroyers. This is basically over, and there's not much that I'll be able to do here. Although, to be fair, most battleships, in fact every battleship in the game, would be losing this game here in this situation. So I'm not going to put this one on the Hizen. I just chose this game as it was my highest damage one that I got in roughly the 10 that I played. But 10 was enough for me to decide that it just really wasn't the ship that was for me, and I wanted to go ahead and put a video out. that's basically going to be it for the video. I will be attaching a port section going over the captain skills,
Hey, this
the
is
upgrades, as well as the armor profile that I was talking about earlier. So let's go ahead and jump into that right now. Alright, now as far as the port section of the video is concerned, I'm going to make it brief, just go over the build and the armor of the ship. Now, for upgrades, this is what I'm currently running. However, your choice in slot 4 is always going to be choice. A lot of people prefer propulsion in my clan. You can also take steering if you feel like the rudder shift is on this ship. Not really much of an issue. Aiming here, obviously, main gun health, and then main battery reload. Concealment's the only thing that's viable here, as these other upgrades are kind of meh. As far as whether or not you want a spotting aircraft or a fighter, the Hizen does have very weak anti-aircraft defenses. However, fighter planes are very easily countered and worked around by good carrier players. So I typically elect to take the spotter plane. There's two reasons. One, the fighters just aren't really that good or worthwhile. And second off, the range on the Hizen is not the best at 20.3 kilometers. So every now and then when I want to need, or when I, so every now and then when I need to go ahead and take longer range shots, I have the do so with the scout plane, and the Hizen does have the shell velocity to be able to hit targets out those far ranges. As far as the captain goes, you're probably going to see this build on pretty much every battleship that I'm running going forward, except for the first two lines of skills. Those are the ones that vary. But for the first point, go ahead and go with preventative maintenance, then turret traverse, move into adrenaline rush, concealment, and deadeye. For the next 4 points, you can either go with fire prevention or an extra heal, depending on which one you prefer. This is always going to be your choice. And then lastly, pick up basics of survivability once you hit 21 points, and that's essentially how I build my captains for every battleship right now. Unfortunately, there's not much diversity in battleship captain builds with the current patch, so you're kind of stuck just running the same thing over and over. As far as the armor is concerned, here you can see 32mm bow, stern, deck, side plating, all that jazz. But this is the armor belt that I was talking about. So if somebody is shooting AP at the side of your ship, sorry, I was saying 343mm earlier in the video. It's actually 356, so slight correction there. But as far as the ship is concerned itself, if somebody's shooting AP at the side of your boat, it's very hard to hit this since it's such a small target. They're more likely to hit this, and if it's not battleship AP and you're not broadside, then they're just going to shatter. So that's a nice little bit of tankiness, whereas usually the rest of the ship is, well, it doesn't really have armor. But that's going to go ahead and be the entire video, guys. So please let me know down in the comments how you feel about the Hizen. I will be posting another video on the Palmern soon. I have been playing it quite a bit recently, testing out the secondaries, and it is quite sad, to be honest. So kind of want to save people some coal on that one going forward. But take care, everybody. I will talk to you all later, and I'm out.